This is the OpenSource.club, a free St. Louis-focused knowledge share podcast. Through industry experts, entrepreneurs, personal stories, and more, we provide the information you need to achieve and thrive. Always visit our website, theopensource.club, for more details. Contact us on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn.
Our climate has gotten warmer in the last 50 years. Floods are common. In coming decades, we can expect that it will get worse. Public health and farming are in jeopardy. Jobs will be lost, but you'll never guess who's leading the fight against climate change. Here's a hint. They have a location on every corner. I'm your host, Bonita Cornute, and this is Money Mondays by the Open Source. I'll be back in a second to clue you in on who can help us slow climate change.
You are listening to Money Mondays by the Open Source. Become a subscriber. Go to www.theopensource.club. Add your email address in the subscribe to podcast window and have podcast notifications delivered to your inbox.
In 2019, Princeton University researchers published Nature Sustainability. It said that municipal sewer plants play a key role in cleaning the atmosphere as they clean the water. Jay Hoskins, MSD's Assistant Director of Engineering, is here to tell us if this is true. Hoskins has been with the company for 13 years. He is responsible for environmental affairs related to MSD's wastewater and stormwater systems. He also is chair of the Missouri Water and Environment Association Governmental Affairs Committee and a former instructor at St. Louis University. MSD is the nation's fourth largest sewer and wastewater utility with more than 9,600 miles of sewer lines. The company services St. Louis City and 90% of St. Louis County. Welcome, Jay. Sounds like you've got a pretty strong background and able to discuss this topic with us. Thank you for joining us.
Looking forward to doing that with you today.
Thank you. Now, this research by Princeton University, it says that water utility companies like MSD are the backbone of urban living and may be a cost-effective way to fight climate change. Is this true?
Well, maybe not the background, maybe more like the cardiovascular system. I don't know. Hard to have one without the other, though, right?
Yes.
Water is important, and if you think about it, St. Louis is located because it is located at the junction of great rivers, and they're important to the world. And this Princeton article is interesting because it helps us think about what the future could be. A couple of points I wanted to draw, from the article, just, one, how much energy a water utility consumes. It's a lot. And that's true all over the world, not just in St. Louis. But also, two, wastewater contains a lot of energy. Wastewater contains carbon, and carbon is energy. And historically, wastewater utilities have been focused on treating water to protect public health and our environment, but not on producing energy. And the future challenges that we're facing, like energy to grow our economy, climate change, and so on, my opinion is that wastewater utilities of the future could have a greater role than they do today. There's an ongoing dialogue about that in the water industry and really what the role and the mission of a water utility should be.
How do you capture that energy, though, from wastewater processing?
Right. So we can talk a little bit about the wastewater process, but, it's kind of funny when folks talk about wastewater, we also, we usually just say it's a wastewater treatment facility. We define ourselves by what comes into the plant, right? If you think about, we don't talk about a beer plant by what, the hops and oats that are used to brew the beer, right? We talk about what comes out of the plant. So really what a wastewater plant is really a clean water plant. It's producing clean water. And those clean water unit processes, that's the engineering term that we use for those individual treatment pieces, involve a process of biology that can sequester or capture carbon, and that can be reused in different ways for energy or other purposes.
Well, I am starting from something we all know and are very familiar with in our homes and involve MSD is our toilet. What happens after a toilet is flushed?
After the toilet is flushed, the water goes into the pipes, the piping system, also we call a collection system. And then that collection system generally goes into some kind of a pumping system. So we have to get the water where it needs to go. We try to use gravity as much as we can, but at some point the water flows downhill and then it has to be pumped up back to the surface. So there's a pumping system. Those pumps use a lot of energy. Those pumps that, operate 24/7. MSD can pump. Some of our pump stations are equipped to pump over 350 million gallons per day. It's a tremendous amount of water. When we need to pump water, we can pump a lot of water. After the pumping system produces the water back into the treatment plant, it goes through a process of settling and straining out the pollution, and then through a biological process of using bacteria to metabolize or consume, eat, if you will, the waste that's in the water, and then we recapture that bacteria, settle it out, disinfect it with typically with either using UV light. In fact, our Limay treatment plant has one of the largest ultraviolet light disinfection systems in the world, and also using a lot of energy. And then after it's disinfected, the water is returned to the river or the lake, in our case, all to the rivers, where it's discharged in the environment. And sometimes, because of floods and whatnot, we even have to pump our effluent or the treated water into the river because the hydraulics of the system just require us to pump that water. Otherwise, the water just stays right where it's at because the river is higher than the treatment plant.
Okay. I think we have seen situations where pumping stations have been taken out and sometimes flooded. That can happen, can't it?
Absolutely can happen. And when we have major floods, we have major pump station outages all along the Mississippi, Missouri, and Merrimack rivers.
What happens to the sewer system when objects like oil and other toxins are flushed or thrown into the sewers? How bad is that problem?
Well, it can certainly be bad if it affects you, and I would say that basement backups and sewer overflows are a problem in our community. We have a major initiative. MSD Project Clear is focused on reducing and eliminating backups and overflows. We've seen a huge reduction in the last decade in those number of backups and overflows. For some perspective, we about 50 years ago probably had 500 constructed overflows. Now we have less than 80. So that's progress, but basement backups are still a bad problem if it happens to you, and we're committed to trying to reduce them and hopefully get down to a lower number still. It's lots of work. It means testing the sewers, making sure the sewers are working correctly. It means videoing sewers. It means cleaning sewers, cleaning up spills, and then cleaning up basements and the environment if needed. So we spend significant resources on that. And, I think that for MSD, this is something that's necessary to operate any treatment system. There's a certain amount of cleaning, but certainly when people are responsible about what they put into the system, it certainly makes the system work better for everybody.
I have that dilemma after I've fried chicken and I've got all this grease in the skillet. I've learned you just don't flush it down the kitchen sink, but then what do you do with it? Well, you try to find a container to put it in, and then you dump it with the rest of your trash. But some people aren't looking at it like that. What happens when all of that grease goes down your kitchen sink?
That's right. Well, first of all, thank you for disposing of your chicken grease in your trash. That's exactly the right thing. That's what we want you to do. Folks who don't do that, if they don't cause a blockage in their own plumbing system and cause their own plumbing to back up, are going to help cause our sewer system to back up. And that means that wastewater ends up going into their neighbors' basements and into our rivers and streams. And those kinds of overflows are very for lack of a better term, nasty. They're very odorous. They're very unpleasant to have to deal with, and so it really is important that we do manage this problem correctly, and that's a responsibility and that the community needs to take on. Everybody needs to do their part to make sure that these fog or fats, oils, and grease type overflows just are minimized to the maximum extent possible.
Do they contribute to basement backups in any way? I mean, if that line is
Yeah, they sure do. I mean, what's going to happen is if the sewer pipe is filled with grease, if the MSD sewer pipe is filled with grease, then the water is going to build up. The water keeps coming into the sewer pipe, and that water is going to keep building up higher and higher and higher, and it's going to find the first place that it can to come out of the sewer pipe, and that's generally the bottom or the floor of your basement. And that's why you have a basement backup. When you have as long as the pipe is open, the sewer will continue to flow and the basement won't back up. But when the water cannot get through the pipe, it's going to come back up into someone's basement or come out a manhole in the street.
Is there anything else that you think we need to address in terms of that Princeton University research study that would be beneficial for customers of MSD and our listeners today?
Well, I think another key thing about the Princeton study is it talks about a lot of emerging technologies that are used to reduce, the carbon footprint of wastewater facilities, and I think while I agree with that, those types of technologies are many years off, and that being said, we do have a number of initiatives today that MSD is doing to help reduce our community's greenhouse footprint. They're, I would say, things that provide 2-for-1 benefits. We have about a $100 million project that we're spending to improve our community's green infrastructure component. What that means is building rain gardens and wetlands and things like that, which the paper talks about. Not only will it help better manage stormwater, but will also produce not only less greenhouse gases, but in some case become a sink. They'll actually soak up some of those greenhouse gases. Another thing that we're doing is we have a major project to replace our incineration equipment, and that will further reduce our methane and nitrous oxide emissions, which are what we call non-CO2 greenhouse gases, but are actually more potent greenhouse gases than CO2. And the last thing is kind of a good story, too, for us. We every year replace, trucks and equipment with, just because, trucks and equipment work out. We've been accelerating that work, and we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars each year replacing equipment, in part because the Department of Natural Resources, through a grant from the Volkswagen Settlement Fund, is incentivizing the retirement of those kinds of vehicles to produce and get vehicles that are more emission-friendly on the highway. So we're trying to take advantage of all those kinds of programs that we can.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned incineration equipment. Where is that? I mean, are there locations that are set up simply or strictly for that purpose?
Yes, there are. We have 2 plants, one at the Bissell Point plant, and the other plant is the Lemay plant. In both of those plants, we incinerate what we call biosolids, or the waste that's produced from a portion of the waste that's produced from the treatment of the water, and that. When you're processing that waste, depending on how you process it, you can produce methane and nitrous oxides.
And where does that go?
They go out smokestacks and go into the atmosphere. So what we're doing is we are producing a process, or creating a process that is more effective at destroying nitrous oxide and methane than the ones that we have today. So the facilities and the technology that we're using today is about 40 years old, and as we replace that with new technology, it'll be about 90% more effective than what we have today.
Do you have websites that feature sewer-safe information?
Sure. Our website, which is msdprojectclear.org, is a great resource for folks. But if you don't want to read about it, you can watch it on YouTube. Search MSD Project Clear on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is great, and I'm not kidding about that. It's really great. We have videos from Timmy Ezel. He's a riot. And you should also see our video about not flushing wipes into the toilet. It's hilarious, and at least my 9-year-old thinks it's pretty funny. So.
I can imagine with Timmy Zell doing it, it's going to crack you up, but you'll also get something out of it, I'm sure.
That's right.
Oh, okay. Well, Jay, I thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it, and we know that the public needs to know that they certainly can help MSD in its efforts to be more effective and more efficient, correct?
That's correct. I mean, MSD serves 1.3 million customers, and most of those folks, don't have to think twice about how the sewer works, and that's great. But nobody wants sewage in their basement, and if everybody does their part to keep junk out of the sewer, the sewer system works better. So everybody do your part. No wipes or grease, please. Thank you.
And thank you, Jay, for your time. We appreciate it.
Take care.
Climate change is about global or regional climate patterns that increase atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. In other words, the world is getting hotter and storms more brutal. With climate change comes health problems, job losses, property repairs, and more. We are paying a hefty price for climate change. Sewers are at the forefront of the battle. If we keep our sewers clean, they can flow freely. That means we suffer fewer basement backups and flooded roads. Don't pour oil down the drain. Don't throw your styrofoam cup in the sewer. Don't flush paper towels, facial tissue, feminine hygiene products, or anything else. This battle is a community effort. We ask that you do your part. Go to www.msdprojectclear.org to learn more. Remember, MSD is at the forefront of the climate change battle. You have been listening to Money Mondays by The Open Source. I am your host, Bonita Cornute. For more shows like this, go to www.theopensource.club. Add your email to the podcast subscription window and get new content in your inbox.
Thank you for listening to the OpenSource.club podcast. Become a subscriber through RSS or YouTube. There's more to come that you won't want to miss. Our name is our web address, theopensource.club.